Let us consider one of the important aspects of the contract, that is free consent. The term free consent means are two or more persons are said to consent when they agree upon the same thing in the same sense. Technically, it is called as consensus et edem. Consent is free when it is not caused by coercion, undue influence, fraud, misrepresentation, or mistake. Therefore, consent is not free when it is caused by coercion, undue influence, fraud, misrepresentation, and mistake. Let us check up one by one. What is coercion and what are its characteristic features or the elements of free consent? First one is coercion. Coercion is nothing but the committing or threatening to commit any act forbidden by Indian Penal Code or unlawful detaining or threatening to detain any property against the interest of any person, whatever may be the intention of causing any person to enter into an agreement. Example, threat to file a case or a criminal suit cannot be said to be coercion. However, threat to file a suit on false charges amounts to coercion as it is forbidden by IPC. Threat to suicide amounts to coercion. Therefore, coercion must have the following features: committing or threatening to commit any act which is forbidden by Indian Penal Code, or unlawful detaining or threatening to detain any property to the prejudice of any person. Such intention is causing any person to enter into an agreement. It is to be noted that it is immaterial whether the Indian Penal Code is or is not in force at the place where the coercion is employed. Now, let us consider what happens to a contract if there is a coercion. Contract induced by coercion is voidable at the option of the party whose consent was so obtained. And the party rescinding a void contract should, if he has received any benefit thereunder from the other party to the contract, restore such benefits as far as may be applicable to the person from whom it was received. And a person to whom money has been paid or anything delivered under coercion must repay or return it. And the second aspect is undue influence. What is an undue influence? A contract is said to be induced by undue influence where the relations subsisting between the parties are such that one of the parties is in a position to dominate the will of the other, and he uses that position to obtain an unfair advantage over the other. The important aspect is there should be relationship between two parties, and the presumptions of undue influence are this. First, the foremost aspect is relation between the parties. A person can influence by the other when a near relation exists. Then let us consider what are the cases where there will be a relation. That is, one of the party must be in a position to dominate the will of the other. This happens under three circumstances, or there are three types of relationships. First one is real and apparent authority, where a person holds a real authority over the other, as in the case of master and servant, and father, a doctor and a compounder, etc. There is a real or apparent authority. Second one, fiduciary relationship, where the relationship of trust and confidence exists between the parties to a contract. Such a type of relationship existing between a father and son, solicitor and client, debtor and creditor, etc. The third one, mental distress. An undue influence can be used against a person to get his consent on a contract where the mental capacity of a person is temporarily or permanently affected by the reason of mental or bodily distress. Example, a ill person or due to old age. And second important presumption is the object must be to take unfair or undue advantage, where the person is in a position to influence the will of the other in getting the consent, must have the object to take the advantage of the other. Here, interestingly, the burden of proving the absence of the use of dominant position to obtain unfair advantage will lie on the party who is in a position to dominate the will of the other. Now, let us move on to the another factor leading to free consent is fraud. Let us consider what is the meaning of the term fraud. Fraud means and includes any of the following acts committed by a party to a contract with his convenience or by his agents with an intent to deceive another party thereto, or his agent, or even to induce him to enter into a contract. Let us consider the following aspects will constitute fraud. First one, a suggestion as to a fact which is not true by one who does not believe it to be true. Second one, the active concealment of a fact by one having knowledge or belief of the fact. Third one, a promise made without any intention of performing it. Fourth one, any other act fitted to deceive, or any such act or omission as the law specifically declared to be fraudulent. These are the real intention of a fraudulent person. One of the important aspects of the fraud is this: mere silence amounting to fraud is a big question. Mere silence as to the facts likely to affect the willingness of a person to enter into a contract is no fraud. But if it is the duty of a person to speak, or his silence is equivalent to speech, silence amounts to fraud. Now let us consider this. Exceptions to this rule. Mere silence amounts to fraud means mere silence is not fraud, but silence is fraud and mere silence is not fraud. Let us consider where silence is treated as fraud. One is when there is a duty to speak, where the circumstances of the case are such that regard being had to them, it is the duty of the person keeping silent to speak. Duty to speak arises when one standing party reposes trust and confidence, and the other where one party has to depend upon the good sense of the other, that is, in case of insurance contracts, contract of marriage, contracts of family settlement, and share allotment contracts, where the silence in itself equivalent to speech. Example, A says to B, if you do not deny it, I shall assume that horse you are selling to me is sound. A says nothing. Here, A's silence is equivalent to speech. Another aspect is misrepresentation. Let us consider what is the meaning of the term misrepresentation. When a person asserts something which is not true, though he believes it to be true, his assertions amounts to misrepresentation in a manner not warranted by the information of the person making it, or that which is not true though he believes it to be true. Or, according to section 18, the following are the circumstances. When a person positively states that a fact is true when his information does not warrant it to be so. Second one, when there is a breach of duty by a person without intending to deceive, which brings an advantage to him and loss to the other. Third one, when a party causes the other party to the agreement to make a mistake as to the subject matter. The last aspect is mistake. Mistakes can be broadly categorized into two. One is mistake of law and mistake of fact. Mistake of law comprises of two, that is mistake of Indian law or the own land and mistake of foreign law. Coming to the mistake of fact is again divided into two categories, bilateral mistake and unilateral mistake. Unilateral mistake is again subdivided into identity of persons or character of written document. Bilateral mistakes are again divided into mistake as to subject matter and mistake as to possibility of performance. Mistake as to reference to the subject matter is again based on quality, existence, identity, title and price and quantity. Mistake as to possibility of performance may be based on legal or physical substance. Now, let us consider what is mistake. When both the parties to an agreement are under a mistake to a matter of fact essential to the agreement, then such an agreement is altogether void. Then let us consider what are the effects of mistakes as to law. A contract is not voidable because it was caused by a mistake as to the law in force in India, but a mistake as to law not in force in India has the same effect as mistake of fact. A unilateral mistake is that to say mistake of one party does not render the agreement void. That mistake must be as to the fact and not the law. Then effect of mistake on validity of a contract. Mistake is some unintentional act or omission or error arising from unconsciousness, ignorance, or forgetfulness, imposition or misplaced confidence, which may be of two types already displaced from the schedule. Bilateral mistake, in which both the parties to a contract are under a mistake, and the unilateral mistake is one when only one party to the contract is under a mistake. And mistake of law is again, as discussed, as reference to the own land, foreign law, and private rights. Mistake of law. Mistake of law does not render a contract void, as one cannot excuse of ignorance of the law of his own country. But if the mistake of law is caused through inducement of another, the contract may be avoided. Mistake of foreign law is excusable and treated like a mistake of fact. Contract may be avoided on such mistake. Coming to the mistake of fact, where the contracting parties misunderstood each other and are at cross purposes, there is a bilateral mistake or mutual mistake. When both the parties to an agreement are under a mistake as to the matter of fact essential to the agreement is void.